Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Прес-центр
Dear
Ukrinform.
colleagues, welcome. The press center at the Ukrinform continues its series of presentations. Today we present the international tool RuAssets for the detection of the hidden Russian and Belarusian assets. In short, this program and company has developed a tool to check on the involvement of the physical legal entities and persons with the Russian and Belarusian assets. I would like to give the floor to the founder and the CEO of YouControl, Serhiy Milman. He will be talking about the advantages of this tool. Welcome, everybody, for those who listen and watch. I would like to thank everybody who has participated in today's event, and I thank the Ukrinform agency for providing us with such a platform. Why did we begin to develop the RuAssets tool? As many countries, we were not ready for the Third World War, for the mass killings, for the occupation of the Ukrainian territories. And currently, all the Ukrainian citizens have felt what the war is. Like many other Ukrainians, our team has mobilized itself, and we thought in the first place, how can we help Ukraine to fight back and to bring the end of the war as soon as possible? We want to reveal those who are complicit in the ties with the Russian Federation or Belarus. This, of course, is fraught with risks, reputational, business, and so on. The sooner the international community passes a decision to cut ties with the aggressor countries, the sooner we will prevail. What does our tool detect? We are able to detect the involvement of the ties between the Russian and Belarusian public figures, and it gives a possibility of freezing the assets of these persons or entities. We also are able to reveal their connections and involvement with the terrorists and propagandists. What does this system allow to do? We are able to identify the connections, even if the contact is not a direct one. It is hidden through relatives and other ways in this long chain. We are able to whistleblow on these ties. We've been analyzing more than 100 open resources on the beneficiaries of possible states and entities in different countries. We have added 18 countries with their beneficiaries and founders. And of course, we are not going to stop because we've got more data to analyze than we can cope at this moment. We have analyzed 50 lists of persons under the sanctions, and we are able to identify the Russian military, their structures as Rosgvardia and the Russian military, and for those who have betrayed Ukraine. We are updating our system on a daily basis, in day and at night, to update our resource base and to create a powerful tool to fight back and repel the aggressor. This instrument, in the first place, can be utilized by the government entities to detect for the assets of the Russian and Belarusian persons, for these assets to be arrested. Second point is to check new counteragents or agents of those who provide connections with the Russian sanctioned or Belarusian sanctioned entities. We want to prevent such a cooperation. The product will also be coming in handy for journalists, for fact-checking, for checking the reliability of the news. It is important for the Ukrainian law enforcement and journalists. It is free of charge, and the Ukrainian authorities, such as Ukrainian Service for National Security, National uh, NAPC, which is Prevention of Corruption uh, Agency, and so on. I would like to give the floor to Oleksiy Zhyrenkov, and he will enlighten you on how this platform works. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in. As Serhiy mentioned, RuAssets, the key idea is to search for the hidden links between companies, entities, or persons who are under the sanctions and have some assets that are hidden. You have to log in the first place. Key feature is the search. We've been adding new sources of data. And Serhiy mentioned that we have more than 18 state registries, not only from Europe, but elsewhere. But the major thing is 2 million people from the Russian Federation in the light of a possibility that sanctioned persons might try to avoid some sanctions. We have also added people from Kazakhstan because we deem this country as a tool to hide their assets. So we are looking into sanctioned subjects such as um, jets and aircraft. We have a list of the private jets that have been sanctioned. Apart from Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Russia, we are looking into other countries, including 240,000 persons. We are tracking down people who are now committing atrocities in Ukraine. Search is something we will begin with. We will start with something which is self-evident, a well-known name. As you can see here, the surname Medvedchuk can be found in 4 databases. Most of them have the tag of sanctioned persons from the United Kingdom, from Australia, and other countries. However, Medvedchuk is too an obvious case. I doubt that someone will be searching this particular persons too often. We will start with something less evident. As an example, I would suggest the name of another Russian businessman. Somebody, Samsonenko Sergei Borisovich. We have identified 10 results. Most of them come from the unified registry of the Russian Federation of the physical persons. Who is he? He's got a list of businesses. He's got 4 companies where he is the owner or he has some shares in the assets. As you can see in the search, he seems to be a big or not that big, but successful businessman. But this is not primary reason. We have developed a module for identifying hidden links, and we are analyzing all the databases that we have to search for the possible and imminent links. And I will display here what our tool has identified. A separate note is that we are trying to include all different transliterations from different languages, including Belarusian, Russian, and other Cyrillic languages into the Latin alphabets. So potentially we have 174 possible links. Somebody, this person is tied with the object of our search, but we have also developed a category of what we call risky connections. For example, if through one of his enterprises, he is linked to another public figure in the Russian Federation. We can analyze this and we see that this is a business person who's got many enterprises under his ownership. And we can also reveal something more interesting. The Rodnik, the well, enterprise is tied with Mr. Goncharov, who is under sanctions in Ukraine. We go further and we will see something more exciting through the mobile card, although it comes under a long name. He's been linked to 3 persons under the sanctions from in 3 different countries. And this is only a tiny share of what our program can reveal. Another interesting example of what I have already prepared in advance is that we've got somebody called Vorontsova Maria from the public sources. We know that she is an alleged daughter of President Putin, and we decided to trace down her links. The first hidden link is President Putin, Vladimir, and there are other links and ties. But I would like to draw your attention to an interesting case here. Through the enterprise, the system has found a link to Boyarsky Serhiy through the joint enterprise that he has with Putin and persons from the closer circle of President Putin. So we can say that Putin's daughter and Mikhail Boyarsky are tied with through the sanctioned list, and they are hiding some assets or are taking them away from Russia. So we will be able to upload new data. We will go from businesses to particular assets, to particular buildings, immovable properties, and other assets and sites that can be under the list of possible confiscation of the people who are supporting the military aggression against Ukraine. Perhaps I will stop here. I would like to give floor back to Serhiy. Perhaps he's got something to say.
Дякую, Олексію, за демонстрацію.
Thank you, Oleksiy, for sharing your presentation. I think our panelists will take the floor in order. Thank you for both of you. I would like to give the floor to the head of the National Agency of Prevention of Corruption, Mr. Oleksandr Novikov. He will tell us how the NAPC is functioning during wartime, how can they use these tools, and perhaps he will share with us some interesting stories. My personal engagement in today's event only is telling you how much we rely on this tool. Since the beginning of the war, we have been focusing 100% on bringing the victory closer. The NAPC is the body that is shaping the list that we believe should be sanctioned. We send that list to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and to our embassies abroad. The officer from NAPC is heading the group of searching of information in those who support the Russian aggression, and we give this list to people to the General Prosecutor's Office, and they also are working with the task groups in the United States, in the National Force, Transatlantic Force, and the General Prosecutor's Office at the European Union. In our work, we are fulfilling 3 areas of work. First is identifying persons, the kind of the activities for our European, American, Japanese, Australian colleagues, as well as in South Korea, and to put them under sanctions. The second area is to identify and detect these assets so the Ukrainian courts might put them under arrest and send such information abroad to be executed and confiscated under the decisions of the law of the courts. Or in the United States and in Canada, they have passed already legislation on the confiscation of the assets of the Russian subjects to pay for the Ukrainian losses in the war. The third area is that we are working with the detection of the assets, where we substantiate our materials to put people on the wanted list on the international level, people from Russia and Belarus, for those who have been implicit in Russia-Ukraine war. We have passed over a list of 2,000 persons. Thanks to the YouControl and RuAssets program, over 2 weeks, starting from 17th of March, we have passed over 2,000 persons to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry and the Ukrainian general prosecutors. So this is our contribution into repelling the aggressor and bringing our victory closer. This is self-evident thing. More to the point, we believe that such a tool and the fact that this tool will be utilized by different authorities around the world, including our banks, is a nuclear option to be used against Russia, economic nuclear option to be used in the future. We want our international partners to provide us with more database for this tool to be covering a wider area. And we are thankful for your help, and we stand ready to help you as best as we can. I am sure that Ukraine and Ukrainians are the best people in the IT, and I'm sure that this IT resource will be developing and will become the best in the world. And I hope that the team of the project is working towards this goal. And of course, the data that they're providing are used on our portal, where we divulge the information on the Russian assets. After we have a light green from the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine, we will publish the information on specific assets that have been arrested under different jurisdictions. Secondly, we are not using this portal to publicize the data, but on Monday we are launching a project called Search nazk.government.ua, where you will see how we use the RuAssets data and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and other countries. Our cooperation will enable us to bring people responsible under sanctions. We have 200 people under sanctions. I believe by the end of this month, we will have 6,000 persons complicit in this aggression under a sanctions list. And I thank you for such an activity, for every Ukrainian, for our Ukrainian armed forces. This is one of the way to secure our victory. I would like to give the floor to the head of the second department at the Search and Detection Directorate, Mr. Kohut. How does your organization ARMA is using this tool? Mr. Volodymyr, are you with us? Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to participate in today's event. As for my department and directorate, what have we done since the beginning of the war? What does ARMA, this directorate for detection and search of the assets, what have we been doing? We have been active, very much actively. We've enjoyed a status of a special status in the government structures of searching and detection of the assets of persons who are involved in criminal acts, and then to bring in some actions against such assets and persons. Our activities provide for the fact that we must do all we can in terms of detection of assets of all people who are tied to the Russian economy, who are sponsoring Russian state revenues. That's why we've been doing our best. ARMA is also participant of different international organizations, Europol, Interpol, etc. And we have set good contacts with international bodies, receiving information from them within the framework of all the cases that must be investigated, and in terms of identifying those Russian moguls who must be stripped of the possibility of sponsoring the Russian army. Our another goal is to make sure that the military criminal acts by the persons and people who are complicit in such criminal acts, both military and the business persons, their assets must be freezed and must be confiscated through the decisions of the courts for the future redevelopment and renovation in Ukraine of those cities and villages and infrastructure that have so heavily crippled by this aggression. What have we done so far? This tool, RuAssets, has been granted to us free of charge. We appreciate that, of course. And let me also mention that before we didn't have such a communication and ties between businesses and government to perform such functions. But the social responsibility is still there, and we are thanking to the YouControl management that for the fact that they have empowered us with this tool. And very many registers that we were using before the armed aggression evidently are under restricted access or are not available anymore. Such a service, such a analytical program as RuAssets and YouControl help us to fulfill our direct obligations and duties. Since the beginning of our cooperation, we have developed a number and searched a number of requests from the General Prosecutor's Office, from the other law enforcement Ukrainian authorities. We have now established a lot of things, for example, a yacht in Croatia. We have identified that yacht and we want to make sure, and we are developing the roadmap of how to put that asset into the Ukrainian jurisdiction, and then to use this money after it has confiscated for the sake of Ukrainian interests. Yesterday, we received information that due to the information we provided, that we received from the European countries, and we passed it over to the General Prosecutor's Office, they have initiated the arresting procedure on the Ruslan aircraft. Now, if my memory serves me right, some of them are in Germany, in the United States, and in Germany. This project and this case is something we are active in devising a roadmap leading to arrest and the future confiscation. What else? At this point, I would like to put forward my own point and perhaps that of my agency, that we are thankful to the team, to the developers for the opportunity to be very effective in our work. Oleksandr Novikov has already mentioned that we've got a task force at the General Prosecutor's Office. We are participating in the structure as well, and we are fulfilling and executing all the duties and tasks that our task force has. Thank you again. Hopefully, in the future, this company will be actively cooperating with the government bodies and with the Ukrainian law enforcement authorities. Thank you. As we have heard, this tool has been used by the national police as well. So I would like to ask the national police representative how they are using it. Perhaps they can also tell us about interesting cases. So I like to give the floor to Dmytro, the head of the Forensic Analysis Department at the National Police of Ukraine. Welcome, colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity. YouControl and its products are something we know for a long time, and we've been using them in forensic analysis. We're using your products, and it is a good thing that you have responded in such a way to this Russia-Ukraine war. Currently, we reaffirm the fact that you have saved us a lot of time. You have helped us in our effort to detect methods abroad. Traditionally, as I have mentioned, we've been working only in the Ukrainian segment. These are the specifics of the Ukrainian National Police, understandably. The major part of our cases are within Ukraine. Currently, we are using your instrument for about a week now in two major areas. First area is something we know already, the task force that we have already mentioned. We've come up with 36 dossiers, and it is safe to say that basically we can trace the trend as far as the Ukrainian segment is concerned. That is to say, we see people who are hiding behind their relatives, their relatives 7 times removed, larger families, something of their assets. So the RuAssets, their mechanisms and tools that they have developed are very valuable because it gives us a possibility to trace down those relatives of the people who are hiding their assets. It's a complex issue. Why is it a complicated process? The access to many foreign registers is either restricted or is a pay, you must pay for it. The fact that you have included many of them will enable us to work without the Orbis procedure. The second area is this. The first one is up, down. That is, we are working from the Russian and Belarusian registers. The other area is something that has to do with the bottom-up direction, something we have been traditionally doing. That is to say, the law enforcement, the judicial officers that have been paid in Ukraine for some illegal activities, we are tracing them, or rather before the war, we were proceeding from the key uh, actors, that is a Ukrainian sector, was going from bottom up. But I believe at some point these two directions, up to bottom up, will converge. Now that we have a new Ukrainian legislation on forced confiscation of the assets of persons complicit or who have committed crimes, we have to come up with registries of the beneficiaries in Ukraine with the Ukrainian companies or Russian Federation or connected to the Russian Federation or Belarus. It is very important that you have provided us with the material that we have asked for. Specific results is something I will not go into because these are only a process, a project in progress. The message that you have mentioned about the possible proposals, I would like to ask you whether you plan to shape a mechanism of exporting data, for example, into this CSV format, to make sure that we can use these data in the FireBeam or IBM A2. So to come up with the graphics of how these persons are connected. Traditionally, it makes more sense to visualize a picture, and we have grown, uh, we have liked this infographics format more. Another point is that the links with other countries that are part of the SIS countries or are Russia satellite countries is a good example. Methodologically, it makes sense. And we are also interested in options with the quasi-groupings of states, meaning the Transnistria territory that we sometimes call quasi-states or satellite states. So we want to, beyond the European segment, we would also like to draw your attention to the points that have to do with the Asia regions, including Syria and other specific countries that are closely related and connected to the Russian Federation. Of course, we are not extraterrestrial bodies. We know how difficult it is to establish links between different persons, especially when the assets are fleeing the country. We are aware of how the matter is complicated, but it is doable after we have shaped all the dossiers in the task force, and we will go into cross-checking and double-checking, plus auditing materials. Hopefully, we will come up with the results that will add to the yachts and the jets. And as I mentioned, task force, my point is that once we form such registries on the properties, we must take on board the well-behaving neighbor procedure when you can inform your point of view if you are a Canadian citizen, citizen of any other country, about such assets. And to do so, we have to have such registers that the NAPC forms, something that we have mentioned in the sanction lists, they must be propagated and publicized throughout the world in as many languages as possible so that the Google segment could reveal them. And everybody must be aware of the people and assets that we search for. But I believe that our civic position must be taken advantage of as well. So you're cool guys. What you have done, believe me, is a fantastic thing. Your algorithms, your search engine, you know, we were using them even before the war, and we put those puzzles together to open investigations. But this new tool is quite new. I would call it a criminal search and detection analysis. And we will, of course, make sure to use it as best as we can. Thank you for today's event. I hope for the future cooperation. I have counted myself the accesses that you have provided, for example, through YouControl and RuAssets. We are now aware that they are equal to a whole department at the police at the regional level. So we are aware of what we have received from you, the value of your work. Once again, I thank you and I thank all the team. Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Oleksiy Zhyrenkov, perhaps you will provide some feedback on the proposals that you have heard. Perhaps Serhiy Milman would like to take the floor. With your permission, thank you for those kind words. As for the exporting option for the government bodies, we provide such a possibility to export your search of links through our database. This is not a problem at all. You can use it now. As for the IBM I2 and other domestic analytical systems, there are two options here. We have domestic PI, and there'll be no problem to grant the access to the government agencies to set up a close cooperation. It'll be effective and very timely. As for the detective journalists and other journalists, we will plan that for a future phase. The priority now is cooperation with the government bodies. There is another option, Open Refine from Google, to analyze data. It allows you to analyze third-party services to receive information from other database in table format. Our system supports such format. So once you're using this Google tool, it will allow you to closely integrate our data right now. Perhaps Serhiy would give the floor now. Otherwise, we can follow our agenda. Indeed, we can follow our agenda. I have experienced here some connection hitches. Once again, Oleksiy, thank you a lot. Now, we will give the floor to our another panelist, the director of the Post-Information Society, the author and trainer of the OSINT Academy. What's your estimation of what you have heard, what you have to say on what you have heard? My name is Dmytro Zolotukhin. I am the advisor to the Ministry of Information. I am currently teaching at Kyiv-Mohyla University, and for some time I have been dealing with the issue of diverging the information into open sources, and we've been working with this open source intelligence since 2016. As of today, I would like to tell you about three major areas of what I can see as important things, and also suggest some proposals. As for the areas of work, I believe that now both government bodies and non-governmental organizations can do in terms of the nationalization of property, that is to say, of confiscating the property of those that are compliant with the Russian aggression. A specific example of this is that we have property of four utility structures in the occupied territories. You know that Ukraine has joined European grid, and recently we have received information on the nuclear power plants that will join European grid as well. So far, we know about some information. There are some investigation on four utilities, regional utilities that are controlled through the intermediary by the high Russian politicians. A lot has been known about that. this person was trying to refuse such information, but it has been detected that the nominal owners that are officially registered, who are members, citizens of the European countries, they are they're acting as some shield, and our data say, and there are facts that must be used within the criminal investigations and some procedures that will be developed at the level of the government to nationalize such assets. That is, to confiscate these properties. Another area that we are talking about is the reinforcement of sanctions against Russia. Every day we receive information that the Russian Federation is trying to use the mechanisms of avoiding the sanctions, those political and economic. Yesterday we heard the information from the um, American authorities, where they are coming up with new proposals. We have also a number of volunteer projects gathering such information on air traffic, on sea traffic, on sea passages. Apart from the sanctions that already have been effected, there are a number of companies registered in Britain, in Cyprus, and under other jurisdictions that are not included into the sanctions list, but they are directly utilized to sponsor and pay for the Russian aggression. The Russian ministries are controlling such companies, and I believe, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the quality of connection is very poor. You might want to switch off the video on your device. Can I keep on talking, or should I switch off my video feed?
Так, давайте спробуємо.
Let's give it a try. Widening of the sections means adding to the list of the state treasuries, as has been suggested by the American Treasury, by the United Kingdom Treasury, and they're talking about other jurisdictions. I think that is very difficult to implement. It seems to be the case that only physical and legal entities from Russia will be sanctioned. But there are companies that are registered in Cyprus or elsewhere, and they are in control and managing the economic ties of the Russian Federation. I'm now dealing with the maritime things, where we have ships that are connected with the Russian economy, and we want to cripple that chance of continuing this war. The other option is to identify and arrest the assets and property that will go into the revenue part of the Ukrainian state budget. As for the volume of information we are gathering data, we have a set of data on the property of the Russian members of parliament, private property, their houses, their flats in the countries of EU, in Cyprus, France, and Montenegro. What I'm saying is that they must be deprived of their property in Ukraine. The sanctions must be widened, and registering those legal entities and physical persons, their property must be confiscated. As for the proposal, there are a lot of persons and legal entities who professionally want now to develop this sector. At this event, I have heard of a task force that is now up and running, and I'm glad to hear that. I think it would be beneficial to have in those task force groups some people responsible for cooperation with those who are able to provide information in terms of keeping track and documenting those assets. It's not a matter of only talking about them and irrespective of all the available formats, but it's a matter of keeping track of them, documenting them, registering and fixing them. Let us help our governmental bodies. You have to tell us in what way civil society and activists can help you to be used in your activities. Another factor that I think a contribution might be is financing of this activity. According to my data, as USAID, the anti-corruption activities for 2018 to 22 amounted at least 24 million US dollars, a money that the USAID and the American government wanted to allocate to fighting corruption in Ukraine. Imagine if 1/10 of that money would have been spent on the automated systems available throughout the world. You know, there would have been no corruption in Ukraine. It's not possible, but the level of corruption would have decreased significantly. I believe that this is an important thing to highlight. Such things will could have helped us before the war and are able to repel the Russian aggression, but would also go into making this country more transparent for future investments, and it will be beneficial for the Ukrainian business in general. So I think what we are doing is beneficial in a wider sense of the word. We must develop a mechanism of interaction between these developers and the government in the first place. And secondly, government bodies might be beneficiaries in terms of financing such projects. The money is available, people are there. It only remains for this project to start working more effectively. It concludes my report. Thank you. We should say that we are sorry to our viewers and listeners for the quality of the sound, but I would like to ask the panelists whether there are new proposals. I'm talking on behalf of the National Police. Let me share a few thoughts on what Dmytro was talking about. As for the financing, because of the international Russian aggression, the international projects so far have been put on hold. So we are not talking about financing. At least 10 days ago, it was put on hold. Perhaps situation is changing. But now the interaction that is now taking place is based on the working groups meetings and other contacts, because according to the Ukrainian legislation, some activities have been suspended, so there is some kind of vacuum here. But step by step, the situation will improve. But the fact that some projects have been put on hold, it's true when you compare them with what was happening before the war. Secondly, what Dmytro was talking about, the volunteer and social activists, the registry that the NAPC has formed and the registry of sanctioned persons, it's still working. It's a good option. One of the options to go is, of course, whistleblowing from the persons and activists. As for the task force and interaction with it, it's a very complicated task. I have been thinking about it, and it makes sense that a good neighbor policy is a good idea, and we support such an idea, but it will take time and thinking how to make it implemented. But there are results of the journalist investigations as an option. We might organize a platform to reflect the results of such investigations. As for what Dmitry had suggested, I would like to highlight another point. Maybe RuAssets have been thinking about that. But let me draw your attention to such a phenomenon as this. I have been researching the issue on how the court registries in the world are reflecting electronic addresses or virtual assets or cryptocurrencies. I know that in YouControl, in RuAssets, you can come across some decision verdicts and the links to some specific persons. I would tell you the following. Once, if there are people, according to the judicial decision text in different countries, in Russia, in Bulgaria, they are sometimes mentioning a person and a legal entity where you have the electronic address of a virtual asset or virtual wallet. We would appreciate such information. It's important for Ukrainian law enforcement, for activists, to see how this electronic address is used. It would send a signal for persons who are now aware of the Ukrainian legislation on the cryptocurrencies. We know that a cold electronic wallet will allow you to get your resources and money flee from the country. Once we know about the transit routes of such assets, I think we might think about coming up with a blacklist or whitelist depending on the court decisions and the registries. Of course, we might talk a lot about darknet and so on, but my point is to take on board my proposal and other proposals. Thank you very much.
Ірино,
Зараз вона під'єднається, в неї певні технічні знову проблеми з
ага,
інтернетом.
зрозуміло.
Our moderator will come online shortly.
Друзі, можливо, в кого ще є якісь запитання, зауваження.
Colleagues, perhaps there are some interventions, some comments, and I'd like to thank Dmitry for his proposals. Of course, we will look into the way of how to provide parsing of the decisions by the courts to reveal some suspicious persons. Of course, I've been researching such an issue, and there are people from the uh, Donetsk and Lugansk, so-called People's Republic, so we might reveal some links here. The names are there still in the registers. For example, the Service of National Security, it's not linked to your product. And of course, once you have some proposals and available information that you think might be shared with us to be added into our system for the system to have some new added value, we would gladly uh, use it. Of course, I will share with you information. Good. Perhaps there are some other proposals and interventions and thoughts.
Так, от дивлюсь, що далі в мене ніяких питань немає, і до спікерів, і в
I
наших
can
панелістів
see that we've got no more questions or comments to our panelists. You have been very exhaustive in your answers. I would like to give special thanks to YouControl, together with the Ministry of Defense, supported by the Renaissance International Foundation. They have developed a platform for unifying all the volunteers, people who help the Ukrainian armed forces. Of course, we should be thankful for that project as well.
поки що один окремий проект, який заслуговує на увагу.
I think it's a worthy project.
І, шановні колеги, якщо питань немає,
Dear colleagues,
тоді,
unless we have
так,
further questions,
якщо так бачу, питань немає, пане Сергію, можливо,
and I think we have no more of those, perhaps Serhiy will tell us a few words to conclude. On behalf of the YouControl team, I would like to thank everybody, those who have been helping us, those who will be helping us. There's one thing I would like to ask those viewers and listeners and the media that will share the information. I want this information to go as wide as we can beyond the Ukrainian borders, so that we have many people that are aware of how to search for, identify, and detect the Russian or Belarusian assets, because this is one of the ways to stop this war. The sooner we detect such illegal entities who are linked to the aggressor, to their propaganda machine, the sooner Ukraine shall prevail. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Glories to heroes. May peace come to all of us. Thank you for such a good presentation and for the opportunities to have a feedback. Thank you. All the best to you and keep safe.
спасибі вам за захід. Ось